My son got married without telling me, but the real betrayal wasn't the secret wedding. It was the billion-dollar reason he did it. They thought they had everything. They had my son, and they had a plan to steal the priceless land my late husband, Arthur, had left behind, a legacy Liam didn't even know he had. They saw me as a quiet, grieving widow, a sweet old woman living in a quiet old house, someone they could easily push aside. They thought I would just fade away. But they never knew about the two secrets my husband left for me. The first was a hidden document, a single piece of paper with the power to destroy their entire empire. And the second was a name. The name of the one woman I hated more than anyone in the world, the woman who is now my only hope for justice. My war for revenge started with a single, devastating phone call. It had been a week. A full week of silence. The knot in my stomach had grown tighter each day my calls to Liam went to his voicemail. I told myself he was just busy. His fiancée, Chloe, was a high-powered CEO. Their world was fast and mine was slow. But a mother knows when something is wrong. My hand was shaking as I decided to call Chloe directly. Maybe she would finally give me an answer. The phone rang 3 times before she picked up. Eleanor. Her voice was as crisp and cool as ever. Relief hit me so hard I felt dizzy. Chloe, hi, I said, trying to keep my voice from trembling. I am so sorry to bother you. I just haven't been able to get a hold of Liam, and I was hoping to find out when the wedding is. Just the date, so I can mark my calendar. A short, sharp pause hung in the air. In that single second of silence, I felt the world tilt on its axis. Then she laughed. It wasn't a warm laugh. It was light, airy, and full of ice. Oh, she said, and the casual cruelty in her voice felt like a physical blow. We already got married yesterday, and we only invited the people that really matter. The words didn't make sense. My mind refused to accept them. Married. Yesterday. The phone slipped out of my hand and clattered to the floor. The sound echoed in the sudden, crushing silence of my home. My son was married. And I was nothing. They thought the fight was over before it even began. They were wrong. If you want to see exactly how I uncovered their web of lies and took back everything they tried to steal, subscribe now. You won't want to miss what happened next. Before my world shattered, it was held together by the simplest things. It was a world built inside a pale blue house on Sparrow Lane, a place where the floorboards groaned with 22 years of memories. After my husband, Arthur, died, that house became my fortress. Raising our son, Liam, became my life's work. I used to shape silver with my hands. Now, I was shaping a boy into a good man. Our bond was everything. We were 2 survivors in a lifeboat, and our rituals were the things that kept us afloat. Every Sunday morning was for pancakes. I can still see Liam as a teenager, tall and lanky, trying to flip one and sending it splatting against the wall. We'd laugh until we couldn't breathe. Every fall, we'd drive to the mountains to see the leaves change, a tradition he and I continued for his father. On every birthday, I would give him one of Arthur's old books. Inside the cover, I'd write a new message, a new piece of his father's soul for him to carry. I wasn't just keeping a memory alive. I was building a foundation for my son, a foundation of love, loyalty, and family. And Liam grew into the man Arthur would have been so proud of. He was kind, gentle, and had his father's soft green eyes. He was an architect who dreamed of building things that would last. He was my son. He was my best friend. Our world was small, just the 2 of us against everything, but it was safe. It was whole. It felt unbreakable. What would you do if the person you loved most brought home a stranger who was determined to burn your whole world to the ground? Her name was Chloe Sterling. The first time Liam brought her over for Sunday pancakes, she walked into my home like a bolt of lightning, bright, loud, and instantly changing the air in the room. She was the CEO of a tech company, and she wore a sleek black dress that probably cost more than my car. Her smile was perfect, dazzling, and completely rehearsed. Liam was under her spell from the second he met her. He hung on her every word, his eyes shining. He was completely smitten. I wanted to see what he saw, I truly did. But I'm a silversmith by trade. I see the tiny details others miss. And I saw that Chloe's ice blue eyes never smiled with her mouth. They scanned my cozy, cluttered living room not with warmth, but with a cold, calculating look, like an appraiser deciding what was worthless. When I showed her the silver locket I made for Arthur, the most precious thing I own, she glanced at it and said, "How quaint," before changing the subject. The moment Liam announced their engagement, I felt a deep, cold dread. The wedding planning began, and so did my slow, painful erasure from my son's life. I offered them the historic hall where Arthur and I had always dreamed our son would get married. "That's so thoughtful," Chloe said, her voice like smooth glass over the phone, but my parents secured a private art gallery. It's much more us. My offer to have their wedding cake made by the bakery that made every one of Liam's birthday cakes was met with, "We're actually flying in a pastry chef from New York." Every suggestion, every piece of our family's tradition, was politely but firmly dismissed. The final cut, the one that truly took my breath away, was when I offered Liam his father's wedding ring. It was a simple silver band I had made myself, engraved on the inside, "My soul, your home." Liam's hand trembled when he held it. For a split second, I saw my son again. But then Chloe glided in. "A beautiful sentiment, Eleanor," she said, placing a hand on Liam's arm. "But we've already had custom rings designed in Milan. It's all part of the aesthetic we're building." Liam put the ring on a side table like it was nothing. He was choosing her aesthetic over his own history. Over me. Soon after, the calls from my son slowed to a trickle, and then they stopped completely. After a week of agonizing silence, I knew I couldn't just wait by the phone anymore. I had to know what was happening to my son. I had to get an answer. So I picked up the phone, took a shaky breath, and made the call that would detonate my entire life. For days, the house wasn't a fortress, it was a tomb. The silence that Chloe's words had left behind was a physical weight, pressing down on me, suffocating me. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, my own reflection in the windows a stranger. The grief was a bottomless, black ocean, and I was drowning in it. It wasn't just the exclusion that hurt, it was the cruelty. The cold, calculated cruelty of it. Why would my son, my gentle, loving Liam, do this to me? The question hammered at me day and night, but there was no answer. In a moment of pure, aching despair, I found myself climbing the rickety stairs to the attic. I just needed to feel close to Arthur. I needed to be surrounded by his things, to breathe in the scent of old paper and leather that was uniquely him. I knelt on the dusty floorboards and opened his old wooden trunk, the one he'd brought with him when we first moved into this house. It was filled with his college textbooks, his worn-out sweaters, and his family history, a history he rarely spoke of. He'd only ever said his family was complicated, and that he'd left their world of money and pressure behind to build a simple life with me. My fingers brushed against the spine of an old book, and inside, tucked between the pages, was a faded manila envelope I'd never seen before. My heart gave a strange little flutter. It wasn't a letter. It was a thick stack of legal documents. Property deeds, trust agreements, bank statements. My eyes scanned the dense, legal language, my mind struggling to understand. Then I saw the name, printed in bold letters at the top of a page, the Vance Conservancy. The words swam before my eyes, but as I read on, the horrifying truth began to sharpen into focus. Arthur hadn't just come from a well-off family. He was the sole heir to a massive land trust that controlled hundreds of acres of untouched coastal land just outside Charleston, land that was now worth an obscene amount of money. The documents were complex, but one single clause, underlined in Arthur's own handwriting, made the blood freeze in my veins. The trust assets were completely locked, untouchable, until his direct heir, Liam, turned 30 years old and was legally married. Liam had turned 32 months ago. Suddenly, the secret wedding wasn't a mystery anymore. It was a motive. The cold grief in my chest was suddenly overtaken by a hot, white-hot fire. I finally knew why they had done it. Now, I had to figure out how to make them pay for it. The fire that had been lit in the attic now burned with a purpose. The grieving mother was gone. In her place was a woman on a mission. I became a detective in my own life, and the internet was my chief informant. For 2 days straight, I barely slept. Fueled by coffee and a burning rage, I sat at my kitchen table, the glow of my laptop screen illuminating my face in the dark. I typed in Chloe Sterling, Sterling Innovations, Charleston Development Projects, and there it was. Article after article detailed Sterling Innovations' ambitious plan to build a massive, futuristic, smart city just outside of Charleston. It was a project worth billions, backed by huge investors. But as I dug deeper, I found more recent articles. The project was in trouble. It was stalled, hemorrhaging money, and on the verge of collapse. The reason was simple. They couldn't acquire the final, crucial piece of land they needed to begin construction. It was owned by a stubborn, old-world family trust that refused to sell. My heart hammered against my ribs as I read the name of that trust. The Vance Conservancy. It all clicked into place, a horrifying mosaic of greed and deceit. Chloe hadn't stumbled into my son's life. She had hunted him down. Their whirlwind romance, the rush to get married, the cold and calculated exclusion of me from their lives, it was all a corporate strategy. They needed to get Liam legally married the second he turned 30 to unlock his inheritance. They hadn't just stolen my son, they had executed a hostile takeover of his entire future. The secret wedding wasn't a betrayal of love. It was the closing of a business deal. The scale of their deception was staggering. How could I, one woman in a small house, possibly fight a billion-dollar conspiracy built on a foundation of lies? I felt like I was standing at the bottom of a mountain with no idea how to climb it. They had all the money, all the power, and they had my son. I slumped over the kitchen table, the weight of it all threatening to crush me. Defeated, my eyes drifted back to the pile of documents from the attic. My fingers absently traced the edges of the manila envelope, and I felt it, one last piece of paper, tucked deep inside, sealed. I'd missed it before. With trembling hands, I tore it open. It was a codicil, a final amendment to the trust. It was written and signed by Arthur just 1 year before he died. It was as if he had seen this day coming. It was as if he was reaching out from the past to give me one final weapon. The document stated that any major transaction involving the Vance Conservancy, like, for instance, selling off all the land, required the unanimous, written approval of 2 parties. The first was his direct heir, Liam, and the second was a designated co-trustee. This co-trustee, a person chosen by Arthur himself, had the absolute power to veto any decision, to freeze every penny, to protect the family's legacy from predators like the Sterlings. Hope, fierce and bright, exploded in my chest. A path to justice had just opened up right in front of me. I scanned the document, my eyes searching for the name of this guardian, this person Arthur had entrusted with our entire future. And then I saw it. The hope in my chest turned to ice. It was a name that tasted like ash in my mouth, a name I hadn't spoken in over 20 years. Genevieve Vance. Arthur's older sister. A woman who had despised me from the moment we met, who had called me a penniless artisan who had ruined her brother's life. After Arthur's funeral, she had tried to take Liam from me, and when I refused, she vanished, leaving nothing but bitterness behind. My only path to justice is blocked by the one person who hates me most. Do you think I can win her over? Comment, unite below if you believe we can team up for the ultimate revenge. And if you're not subscribed, you're going to miss what happens next. The name on the page, Genevieve Vance, was a wall between me and any hope of justice. She was a ghost, a woman who had intentionally vanished from my life, and I had no idea where to even begin looking for her. My first few days were a frustrating series of dead ends. I searched her name online and found nothing. It was as if she didn't exist in the modern world. I dug through Arthur's old address book, my fingers tracing over the faded ink. I found an old address for an apartment in Atlanta. I called the building's management office, only to be told it had been torn down a decade ago. It felt like I was chasing a ghost. I even tried calling the old Vance family law firm, the one listed on the trust documents. A stuffy-sounding paralegal put me on hold for 10 minutes before coming back on the line to inform me that they could not, under any circumstances, give out a client's personal information. It was another door slammed in my face. The world of old money and power was closing ranks, protecting its own. For a moment, Sitting alone in my quiet kitchen, I almost gave up. The fight felt too big, the walls too high. But then I thought of Chloe's smug, dismissive laugh. I thought of my son lost in a world of lies. The fire in my gut flared back to life. I would not give up. I went back to Arthur's trunk one last time, sifting through every piece of paper. Tucked into the back of his old checkbook, I found it. A receipt from a fine art storage facility in New York City, dated a few months after Arthur's funeral, with a note scribbled in his handwriting, for G. It was a long shot, but it was the only real clue I had. I realized then that I couldn't do this alone. Using a portion of my emergency savings, money I had guarded fiercely for 22 years, I hired a private investigator. It felt like a huge, reckless step, but I was done playing it safe. I gave him the slip of paper and the name. 3 days later, he called me back. I found her, he said. She doesn't go by Vance anymore, but it's her. She runs a high-end financial consulting firm in Manhattan. I'm sending you the address. But a word of advice? This woman is surrounded by walls of steel. Be ready for a fight. The next morning, I was on a plane. I stood on a busy street in New York City, a world away from my quiet lane in Charleston, staring up at a skyscraper made of black glass and steel. I took a deep breath, pulled open the heavy glass door, and walked into the lion's den. Genevieve's office was on the 50th floor. It was less of an office and more of a cold, white box overlooking the city. There were no family photos, no personal trinkets, just a sleek black desk, 2 chairs, and a wall of glass. It was the complete opposite of my warm, cluttered home. It was the opposite of everything I was. She hadn't changed. She was older, her hair now sharp, silver bob, but her eyes were the same, as piercing and critical as they had been 22 years ago when she looked at me across Arthur's grave. She didn't stand up when I walked in. "Eleanor," she said, her voice devoid of any warmth. "I must admit, I never expected to see you again. To what do I owe this? Surprise." I clutched my purse, my heart hammering. "Genevieve, I need your help." A thin, humorless smile touched her lips. "Help?" "Arthur made his choice a long time ago. He chose you and your quaint, simple life. You are nothing to me." Her words were like tiny shards of ice, meant to cut deep. The old me, the grieving widow, would have crumbled. But I wasn't that woman anymore. "This isn't about me, and it's not about you," I said, my voice steady. I walked to her desk and laid out the documents one by one. The Vance Conservancy Trust. The news articles about Sterling Innovations and their failing project. And finally, the codicil Arthur had left behind. I placed it directly in front of her. "It's about this." She was silent. Her sharp eyes scanned the pages, her expression unreadable. She read every word, her focus so intense the air in the room felt thick. I watched her face, searching for any sign, any flicker of emotion. I saw it when she read about the Sterling project. A flicker of contempt. I saw it again when she read her own name on the codicil, designated by Arthur as the protector. It wasn't sadness or nostalgia. It was a flash of fierce, cold pride. She finally looked up, her gaze pinning me in place. "They thought my brother was a sentimental fool who ran away from his responsibilities," she said, her voice a low, dangerous hum. "They didn't realize he was a king who had simply chosen to live in a cottage. And they mistook you for a commoner." She tapped a long, manicured finger on the codicil. "This is not about helping you, Eleanor. This is about protecting the Vance name from corporate vultures who are too stupid to read the fine print." She leaned back in her chair, a new, predatory light in her eyes. "This is my world, Eleanor. From now on, we play by my rules." She paused, letting the statement hang in the air between us. "The Sterlings are hosting a gala in 3 weeks to announce their project to their investors. We're going to attend," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "And you, my dear sister-in-law, are going to be the guest of honor." The 3 weeks that followed were the strangest of my life. I had gone to New York to find a ghost and had instead found a general. Genevieve's cold, minimalist office became our war room. We were an unlikely pair, a quiet Charleston silversmith and a ruthless Manhattan financier, united by the memory of one man and a shared enemy. I quickly learned that Genevieve did not operate on emotion, she operated on strategy. "Forget about suing them, Eleanor," she said on that first day, waving a dismissive hand. She paced in front of the glass wall, a predator in her own habitat. "A lawsuit is a battle of attrition. It takes years. They'd bury us in legal motions and bleed you dry. By the time a judge ever saw the case, their smart city would be built, and the Vance land would be a memory. We are not fighting for money. Money is boring. We are fighting for their total and complete annihilation." I watched her, a knot of fear and excitement tightening in my stomach. "What does that mean?" She stopped pacing and looked at me, her eyes glinting. "It means we don't attack their bank accounts. We attack their reputation. In my world, reputation is the only currency that matters. We are going to make the Sterling name so toxic that no one will ever trust them with a dime again. We are going to turn them into a public disgrace." Her plan was both terrifying and brilliant. The Future Forward Gala, as she had called it, was the perfect stage. "It's their coronation, Eleanor," she explained, pulling up the event's website on a massive screen. It showed a picture of Chloe and her father, Carter Sterling, smiling their perfect, polished smiles. Every major investor, every journalist, every powerful person in the city will be there to kiss the ring. It is the single moment they are most vulnerable because their pride will be at its peak. When you're standing on top of the world, you have the farthest to fall. "But, Genevieve, what about Liam?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "He's my son. He'll be there, standing with them." Genevieve's expression hardened. "Liam made his choice when he let that woman put a price tag on his father's legacy. He is either a willing participant or a fool. In this war, it doesn't matter which. He will be forced to choose his side when the lights are brightest." This is about Arthur. Our days fell into a new rhythm. Genevieve worked her connections, gathering intelligence. She found out the exact schedule for the gala, down to the minute. Carter Sterling was set to give the keynote address at 9 p.m., where he would officially announce the acquisition of the land and the start of the project. That was our window. While she handled the logic, she assigned me a different kind of homework. "You can't walk in there looking like a heartbroken mother-in-law," she declared one afternoon, looking me up and down with a critical eye. "You must look like their equal. You have to look like you could buy their company and turn it into a parking lot without a second thought." Before I could protest, a team of people descended upon the hotel suite Genevieve had arranged for me. There were stylists, hairdressers, and racks of designer clothes. It was a complete reinvention. As they worked, Genevieve coached me. She made me practice walking in heels. She taught me how to hold my head high, how to meet someone's gaze without flinching. "Our weapon is the truth," she said, holding up a copy of the codicil. "But the delivery system is you. When we interrupt Carter Sterling's speech, we're going to hijack the presentation. While he's talking about his bright future, the screens are going to show everyone the past he tried to bury." She had already hired a tech expert to make it happen. "But you, Eleanor, are the final blow. After the documents are revealed, you will walk onto that stage. You will not cry. You will not scream. You will look at them with cold, quiet power and deliver the final, killing line." We rehearsed it over and over until the words felt less like a script and more like a part of my own soul. I was no longer just a victim. I was being forged into a weapon. The night before the gala, standing in front of a mirror in a stunning, dark blue gown, I barely recognized myself. I saw a woman who looked strong, powerful, and dangerous. I was ready. The Sterling Innovations Future Forward Gala was held in a massive, modern museum, a place with ceilings so high they seemed to disappear into the darkness. The room was a glittering sea of black tie gowns, expensive champagne, and the low hum of powerful people making powerful deals. It was a world I had never been a part of, a world designed to make people like me feel small and insignificant. But as Genevieve and I walked through the grand entrance, I didn't feel small. I felt like a hunter. Every head that turned our way saw two impeccably dressed women who looked like they belonged. No one saw the grieving mother from Charleston or the estranged Vance sister. They saw power. Genevieve had been right. The clothes, the hair, the cold confidence she had drilled into me, it was all armor. It made me invisible in the one way that mattered. No one could see the storm that was raging inside of me. My eyes scanned the crowd, and then I saw them. The Sterlings were holding court near the center of the room, bathed in a soft spotlight. Carter Sterling, Chloe's father, was a handsome man with a politician's easy smile and cold, shark-like eyes. He stood with a glass of champagne in his hand, accepting congratulations from a circle of admirers. And beside him stood Chloe, looking radiant in a shimmering silver dress. She was glowing, a queen in her castle, laughing at something her father said. And then I saw my son. Liam was standing next to her, a half-step behind, like a handsome accessory. He was wearing a perfectly tailored tuxedo, his hair perfectly styled. He looked like a stranger. He smiled when Chloe smiled, he nodded when she nodded, but his eyes were empty. He looked lost, a ghost at his own party. Our gazes met across the crowded room for a fraction of a second. I saw a flicker of something in his expression, confusion, maybe even guilt, before he quickly looked away, turning his attention back to Chloe. Did he know I would be here? Did he have any idea what was about to happen? The pain of his betrayal was a sharp, physical ache in my chest, but I pushed it down. Tonight was not about my broken heart. It was about justice. Genevieve touched my arm lightly. "Don't look at them," she murmured, her voice low. "Look through them. They are beneath you. Mingle. Smile. We are simply two interested investors, nothing more. The performance is everything." For the next hour, we played our parts. We drifted through the crowd, accepting glasses of champagne we didn't drink and nodding politely as people talked about stock prices and market trends. I felt like I was moving through a dream. Every polite smile felt like a lie. Every polite nod felt like a betrayal of the rage that was simmering just beneath the surface. The tension in the room was a living thing, coiling tighter and tighter as the clock ticked toward 9 p.m. The air crackled with anticipation for Carter Sterling's big announcement. But only two people in that entire room knew what announcement was really coming. As the lights began to dim, signaling the start of the presentation, my heart started to hammer against my ribs. This was it. The moment of truth. Genevieve gave me a sharp, almost imperceptible nod. Our tech expert was in place. The documents were ready. Carter Sterling was walking toward the stage, a confident, triumphant smile on his face. He was about to celebrate his greatest victory. He had no idea he was walking into his own public execution. But as he stepped up to the podium and the crowd fell silent, I realized there was one final, loose thread. One last thing I had to do before the world exploded. I needed to speak to my son. One last time. As Carter Sterling cleared his throat at the podium, a wave of applause rippled through the room. It was the perfect cover. Genevieve created a small diversion, drawing the attention of a nearby security guard, and I slipped away from her side, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I moved through the shadows at the edge of the room, my eyes locked on my son. Liam was standing near a curtained alcove, momentarily alone as Chloe schmoozed with an investor. This was my only chance. He didn't see me until I was right in front of him. "Mom," he whispered, his eyes wide with shock and confusion. "What are you doing here? How did you get in?" He looked pale under the dim lights, his perfect facade cracking. "I'm not here to cause a scene, Liam," I said, my voice low and steady, just as Genevieve had coached me. There was no pleading in my tone, no tears in my eyes. Just the cold, hard weight of the truth. "I just have one question for you, and I want you to be honest with me. How did you and Chloe meet?" He looked flustered. "What?" "We met at that coffee shop downtown, you know that." She spilled her latte on my portfolio. We laughed about it. I held his gaze. "That's a sweet story. Is that what she told you?" From my small, elegant clutch, I pulled out a single folded piece of paper. It wasn't one of the main trust documents. It was something Genevieve's investigator had uncovered, a digital request log from the county probate court. "This is a record of all inquiries into your father's estate. It shows that an investigator, hired by Sterling Innovations, accessed Arthur Vance's entire file. They saw the land, the trust, the inheritance clause, everything." I let him absorb that for a moment before delivering the final, quiet blow. They pulled that file 6 weeks before you ever met Chloe at that coffee shop. I watched the color drain from his face. He stared at the paper in my hand, his eyes darting back and forth as he read the names and the dates, his mind desperately trying to make sense of something that made no sense at all. The charming, accidental meeting that was the foundation of his entire love story was a lie. It was a calculated, corporate maneuver. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a dawning horror. He looked like a little boy again, lost and terrified. "I will always love you, Liam," I said, my voice softening for just a second. "You are my son. But what is happening here is bigger than us. They are trying to steal your father's legacy, and I will not let that happen." I folded the paper and put it back in my purse. "You're going to have to decide who you are and what you stand for. And you're going to have to do it very soon." I turned and walked away without another word, leaving him standing alone in the shadows, the foundation of his life shattered. I could feel his eyes on my back as I walked back to Genevieve's side, my face an unreadable mask of calm. Carter Sterling's voice was booming through the speakers now, full of pride and arrogance. The show was about to begin. The bomb is about to drop. Liam has just been shown the truth, and I am walking toward the stage. Will he stand with his mother or his wife? Before we show you the epic conclusion, hit that like button if you're ready for the Sterlings to finally get what they deserve. The applause for Carter Sterling finally died down, and the vast museum hall fell silent. He stood at the podium, bathed in a confident glow, his smile wide and triumphant. This was his moment. This was Chloe's moment. They thought they had won. "Ladies and gentlemen," Carter's voice boomed, perfectly amplified, "tonight marks not just a new chapter for Sterling Innovations, but a new future for Charleston. My daughter, Chloe, a visionary beyond her years, has spearheaded a project that will redefine urban living. We are proud to announce the final acquisition of the prime coastal acreage needed for our future-forward smart city." A polished, high-tech graphic of the sprawling smart city flashed onto the massive screen behind him, glowing brightly. The audience gasped, a collective murmur of impressed whispers filling the room. Chloe, standing off to the side of the stage, beamed, nodding humbly as if she hadn't just orchestrated a massive corporate takeover disguised as a love story. Liam, I noticed, was still standing in the shadows where I'd left him, his eyes fixed on the screen, a haunted look on his face. This was our cue. From my peripheral vision, I saw Genevieve move. She didn't rush. She walked with a calm, deliberate stride, a ghost in plain sight. No one noticed her at first, blending into the dark elegance of the event. But then she reached the control booth at the back of the room, a small, glass-enclosed area where the gala's tech crew sat, oblivious. Our hacker, a young man with bright, nervous eyes and lightning-fast fingers, was already in position. He glanced up at Genevieve, who gave him a sharp, almost imperceptible nod. In an instant, the sleek smart city graphic on the main screen flickered. A ripple of confusion went through the audience. Carter Sterling, mid-sentence, paused, a puzzled frown creasing his brow. "Technical difficulties, I presume," he chuckled, attempting to play it off. But then the screen went black for a tense, silent second. And when it came back on, it was no longer displaying the Sterling Innovations logo. Instead, a stark, elegant image of a sprawling, untouched coastal landscape filled the screen, overlaid with a single, unfamiliar logo, the Vance Conservancy. A ripple of murmurs, louder this time, spread through the room. Carter Sterling's charming smile vanished, replaced by a look of bewildered annoyance. "What is this?" he muttered, looking toward the tech booth. But before he could demand an explanation, the screen changed again. This time, it showed a zoomed-in image of an old, faded legal document. The words were small, but the bold heading was unmistakable: "Last Will and Testament of Arthur Vance." Then another document flashed up, highlighting the section about the land trust, the age clause, and the marriage clause. The murmur in the room grew into a roar of confused whispers. People leaned forward, straining to read. Phones came out, recording. Chloe, seeing the chaos erupt, rushed forward to the stage, her face no longer glowing, but tight with panic. "Father, what's going on?" she hissed, snatching the microphone from his hand, her polished composure finally cracking. "Turn this off." But it was too late. The screen cycled through more images, old maps, property lines, and then the very same probate court document I had shown Liam just moments before, the one detailing Sterling Innovations' early investigation into Arthur's estate, weeks before Liam and Chloe had supposedly met. The connection was undeniable. The scam was exposed. Panic truly erupted now. Investors began to stand, their faces a mixture of shock and outrage. The room was a cacophony of raised voices, shouts of fraud, and what is the meaning of this? The gala, meant to be Carter and Chloe's crowning glory, had turned into their worst nightmare. It was a beautiful, chaotic symphony of their undoing, and I felt a surge of cold, fierce satisfaction. This was only the beginning. Now it was time for me to walk onto the stage and deliver the final, crushing blow. The moment I had been rehearsing for, the moment Arthur had secretly prepared for, was here. The chaos in the room was a storm, but as I walked toward the stage, it was like I was in the eye of the hurricane. A path seemed to clear for me. The angry shouts and confused murmurs faded into a dull roar in the background. My heart wasn't hammering anymore. It was beating with a slow, steady, powerful rhythm. I felt my husband, Arthur, walking with me. I felt the strength of my own resolve, forged in grief and fire. I was no longer a victim. I was the reckoning. Chloe was still on stage, her face a mask of pale, furious disbelief, screaming at the tech booth. Her father, Carter, stood beside her, utterly stunned into silence. Neither of them saw me until I was standing right in front of the podium. I didn't grab the microphone. I simply waited. One by one, the people in the room noticed me. A hush began to fall as hundreds of pairs of eyes turned in my direction. In the sudden, heavy silence, I picked up the microphone. "Good evening," I said, my voice perfectly calm and clear, amplified throughout the vast hall. "My name is Eleanor Vance. I am Arthur Vance's widow and Liam Vance's mother." A new wave of gasps rippled through the audience. I looked out and saw a sea of shocked faces, all of them finally understanding that this was not a technical glitch. This was a public execution. "The documents you see on the screen are real," I continued, gesturing behind me. "The Vance Conservancy is my late husband's legacy. A legacy of land and family, meant to be protected. A legacy Mr. Sterling and his daughter planned to steal. This is slander. Lies." Chloe shrieked, lunging for the microphone, but I simply turned my back to her, my focus on the audience, on the investors whose money she had so desperately needed. "They did their research," I said, my voice cutting through her protests like glass. "They found the trust. They found the clause that stated the assets would be unlocked when my son, the sole heir, turned 30 and was married. So they didn't just target the land. They targeted my son. They manufactured a love story to orchestrate a corporate takeover. They arranged a secret wedding and cut his own mother out because my presence and the traditions I represent were a threat to their business deal." I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. I could see the dawning horror and disgust on the faces of the investors. I turned my head slightly, my eyes finding Chloe's. Her face was a twisted ruin of rage and panic. "You were so thorough," I said, my voice dropping to an almost conversational tone, yet every person in the room could hear it. "You researched the land, the trust, the legal requirements. You read every document, every clause. But you missed one." As if on cue, the final document flashed onto the screen behind me. It was Arthur's codicil. I saw Genevieve's name, circled in red. My husband was not a fool. He was a man who understood greed. He knew that one day, people like you might come for what he left behind. So he put in a failsafe. A poison pill. You see, any major decision regarding the Vance Conservancy requires the unanimous approval of two people. I let my gaze drift from Chloe to the back of the room, where Liam stood, frozen, his face ashen. Then my eyes landed back on Chloe, and I delivered the final, killing blow. "You married a man to steal his land," I said, my voice quiet, but devastating. "But you forgot to read the fine print. You may have my son's signature on a marriage license, but the second signature you will need belongs to the trust's co-trustee, a woman who would rather burn the entire Vance legacy to the ground than let you touch a single inch of it. I put the microphone down gently on the podium. The Vance legacy is not for sale. The moment I set the microphone down, the silence in the room shattered. It wasn't just noise, it was pandemonium. A dozen angry investors swarmed the stage, shouting at a shell-shocked Carter Sterling. Cameras flashed like lightning, capturing Chloe's face, a perfect mask of beauty now twisted into a hideous snarl of pure hatred. In the chaos, Genevieve appeared at my side, her hand a firm, steady presence on my arm. "It's done," she said, her voice cutting through the noise. "Let's go." We walked out of that museum, leaving the Sterling Empire to burn behind us. The fallout was faster and more brutal than I could have ever imagined. It was a house of cards collapsing in a hurricane. The next morning, every major news outlet was running the story. Headlines flashed across my television screen. Billion-dollar smart city, a sham. Sterling Innovations under investigation for fraud. The Vance Conservancy. How a secret heiress and a widow toppled a corporate giant. The consequences were swift. The big investors pulled out within 24 hours. Sterling Innovations, buried under lawsuits and federal investigations, filed for bankruptcy a week later. The Sterling family name became a synonym for greed and disgrace. I saw pictures of them in the papers, hounded by reporters, their perfect smiles replaced by haggard glares. Chloe's marriage to my son was annulled so quickly it was like it had never happened. She had built her entire world on a foundation of lies, and she lost everything. I saw Liam 2 days after the gala. He came to the house on Sparrow Lane, looking like a ghost. He didn't try to make excuses. He just sat at my kitchen table, the same table where he used to eat pancakes and laugh, and he wept. He cried for his own blindness, for the father whose legacy he had almost given away, and for the mother he had so deeply betrayed. It wasn't a fix. It wasn't a magic wand that healed all the wounds. It was just the painful, devastating beginning of a long road back. The revenge was complete, the enemy was vanquished, but now came the hardest part, figuring out what was left of my family and how to rebuild it from the ashes. 6 months later, the world looked different. The autumn leaves were beginning to turn, just as they always did, but I was seeing them with new eyes. The Vance Conservancy was no longer a secret weapon. It was a public promise. Genevieve and I, now the co-chairs of the board, had transformed it. Instead of a smart city, the land was being turned into a public park and nature preserve, named the Arthur Vance Memorial Park. It was now a legacy not of money, but of peace and community, what Arthur would have truly wanted. My relationship with Genevieve had transformed too. We weren't suddenly best friends who baked cookies together. She was still as sharp and pragmatic as ever, and I was still, in her eyes, a sentimental artisan. But a deep, unspoken respect had grown between us. We were two very different women who had been bound together by the love of one man and the fight to protect his name. We were allies. We were family. Liam was healing. He was in therapy, finally taking responsibility for his choices and his blindness. He came over every Sunday for pancakes, just like he used to. It was awkward at first, the space between us filled with unspoken words. But slowly, carefully, we were rebuilding. Our bond wasn't the same as it was before, it was stronger. It was forged not in naive devotion, but in the harsh, honest truth. He was becoming his own man, not just my son, and I was prouder of him than ever. And me? I found my way back to my old workshop. For the first time in over 20 years, I lit the flame on my torch. I picked up my hammers. The familiar weight of the tools in my hands felt like coming home. The rhythmic tap-tap-tap of the hammer on silver was a kind of meditation, a way of reshaping my own future. One afternoon, as the golden sunlight streamed through the window, I finished a piece, a simple, elegant silver locket. I held it up to the light, not seeing a memory of a life that was lost, but a symbol of a life that had been reclaimed. I was not just a widow. I was not just a mother. I was a creator. I was a protector. And for the first time in a long, long time, I was completely and unshakably at peace. Eleanor took back her family's legacy and her own power. Was her revenge justified? Let me know your verdict in the comments. And if you believe that a person's true strength is revealed in the fire, subscribe and turn on notifications, because stories like Eleanor's are what we're all about.